But we are now going to get into and change the discussion over to talking about chewing gum. Okay? Why? Because we like gum. And no, just actually because we got some questions about how chewing gum can potentially increase your cognitive function, and we were interested in that, so we found some studies. But not only chewing gum, something called carbohydrate rinsing. So, Elliot, take it away.
So, carbohydrate rinsing. So, we're going to be talking about kind of this phenomenon. I don't know if you guys watch a lot of sports, if you've ever seen athletes do this, but it's kind of a common belief that is picking up in the sporting community, that kind of rinsing with Gatorade or something similar, Powerade, anything else that has like a high concentration of carbohydrates in it, so that means kind of a sugary substance, is actually helping them improve their ability to run faster, hit harder, increases their reaction time, makes them more alert, all of these things, and for different reasons. And those reasons really aren't well known. There's no real consensus in the scientific community as to why, but there is a lot of research that kind of shows that it does work. So while we really haven't figured out the science yet, there's a couple of theories that are out there, and we'll touch on those a little bit. But yeah, the main idea is that swishing with a sugar-filled sports drink has a refreshing feeling to it. It kind of gives you that feeling that you drank something sugary without the sugar crash that is inevitably going to come. Gatorade and Powerade are really big popular sports drinks, but a lot of good coaches and athletic trainers will kind of lean more towards the sugar-free varieties for their teammates, because they know that even though you get a nice little burst of energy, it can come with a pretty significant sugar crash. So this practice where you kind of just rinsing it in your mouth and spitting it out kind of helps you to avoid that very real metabolic sugar crash that comes after the sugar high. So the system, it's kind of thought that this works by tricking your brain. So you have these receptors in your mouth, on your tongue. They give information to your brain about what's going on. Sweet things have a different kind of an effect than salty things. And then there's some studies that kind of should suggest that even though you can't really taste a carbohydrate, like you wouldn't be able to identify what that is, like kind of independent of anything else that you put in your mouth, there is some capacity for your body. I think they looked at rat studies, and they showed that carbohydrates actually have an ability to be detected by your brain, whether you can taste it or not. That is all how this kind of is explained to work, to actually trick you into thinking that more energy is coming, so your body has less of an inhibition of kind of expending more energy in the short term to give you kind of a boost. And we'll be talking about kind of like how long the boost can work for, this little like hack. But essentially, one of the main theories out there for both this and chewing gum is that it kind of plays on what's called the reticular activating system. So that's kind of your body's like sensory system in the brain that just kind of lets you know that, hey, it's time to be alert and awake and doing things. So I don't know if you've ever seen somebody like in a boxing match pass out, and they'll take those smelling salts with the ammonia and they'll crack it open in front of their nose, and it wakes them right up and they jolt awake. That's like the similar type of a concept where you're giving a very strong input to the reticular activating system, which immediately increases alertness. Bodybuilders will actually do this before lifting. They'll like smell smelling salts to try to get more of a activation out of their muscles and get more of their body systems kind of online using this hack. It'd be interesting to look at smelling salts and aiming yet. Not recommending that you all are out there sniffing salts, but it would be kind of an interesting. Please don't go out and buy a bunch of smelling salts.
Hold on. Let's make sure we say that again. Please do not go and buy a bunch of smelling salts and just snort it up right before your game. We're not saying that. We're saying there's a potential to increase your level of alertness that could lead to some benefits, but we are not suggesting you do it. It needs to be studied. Okay? Thank you.
Y'all are going to be out there bleeding like anime characters from your nose. It's just like, psh, please don't. No smelling salts. But anyhow, carbohydrate rinsing and gum works in the same mechanism at a much milder pace and is much safer. So there's no harm in you doing that. But anyhow, so let's look at like what the studies are saying about the actual effects. So the first study that kind of looked at this carb rinsing phenomenon was done on cyclists, and they took this carb drink and they were able to kind of improve their time in the 30K time trial. And they studied it to where it was a significant enough change that they were to say, yeah, this is what actually made the difference. Up next, there is a study in fencers, And that actually showed that they had increased accuracy with their lunging when they were doing this carb rinsing technique. So that can maybe have some translations to aim science. If accuracy is improving in a situation like fencing, where it's not a ton of endurance activity going on, it's much more about the fine motor skills of putting the lance where it needs to be. So they did a systematic review, and that's kind of like where they look at a whole bunch of these different studies. And they did determine that this carbohydrate rinsing was different than just rinsing with water. So it actually has something to do with the chemicals that are in the carbohydrate solution, not just the act of rinsing your mouth out. So that is a significant point here. So we can kind of know that it's not just chalked up to the act of putting some kind of a fluid in your mouth.
Right, right. It is, I think, as you described, we have those receptors in our mouth, not sensing just taste, but the presence of sugar, the presence of carbohydrates that may be the underlying mechanism. We aren't completely sure.
Yeah. So the benefits of carb rinsing are increased focus and decreased fatigue, and they can last for about 30 to 70 minutes, which is pretty significant, honestly. If you're coming up on that last tournament, feel free to go switch some Gatorade. That could be really helpful. For optimal performance, they gave these recommendations. So you should consume a high carbohydrate meal 2 to 3 hours before you're exercising, and then ingest or rinse a small amount of that carbohydrate containing solution periodically while you're exercising. So that was done in athletes that were exercising, but we can assume that the same effects would be present during a gaming session or a tournament or something like that. We are making that assumption. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is true, because there are no studies that look at carbohydrate rinsing in gamers specifically. So we are just kind of making conclusions based on the information that we have. So can this benefit your aim? The findings that we see here, they really show that mouth rinsing with the carbohydrate solution decreases the amount of fatigue that you actually have with long-term exercise and performance type situations. And this particular study kind of proposed a different mechanism, that it has more to do with decreasing the amount of stress hormones that are released, as opposed to actually changing the way that your body metabolizes anything, which could very well be in line with that. When you are eating things, it activates what's called your parasympathetic nervous system. So what that means is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight system. It gets you all keyed up, and the parasympathetic nervous system kind of gets you a little bit more chilled out. So decreasing those stress hormones can actually improve what we call kind of the flow state, which is kind of where you feel like you're hitting all your shots really well. You feel like you're playing, you're making good decisions, all of these things. So like I said, these mechanisms are still kind of up in the air. The research isn't real clear, but that is definitely one good potential way that this could be working. But it seems pretty clear that it does work regardless of our understanding of how it works. So yeah, using a really high sugar solution isn't necessarily necessary. Like I said, it's the carbohydrates in it. So using kind of a low sugar Gatorade that still has the carbohydrates, it still has all of the different electrolytes in it, things like that, will still be beneficial than using something that's super high in sugar that's still going to give you cavities. So that's definitely something to consider. So make sure you guys are brushing your teeth if you actually decide to do this with full sugar Gatorade. So up next, we are talking about chewing gum, and very much in the same vein as far as what different mechanisms could be at play here. There are studies that show that it is helpful in the same way that it shows that the carbohydrate rinsing is helpful, and the mechanisms have a lot of the similar types of language used around them. But one of the interesting things that I saw that was a little bit different when explaining the chewing gum is kind of the process of chewing, because they actually did gum with no flavor in some of these studies, and they looked at gum with flavor, and they really didn't find too much of a big difference. So that's that research paper kind of chalked it up to the whole idea of actually chewing. So like when you're stressed out, you grind your teeth, and that has a lot of like input into the amount of like blood flow that's being sent to your head area, and different systems in the brain that are kind of responsible for that sympathetic nervous system response, kind of keying up your alertness and focus. So that study really kind of looked at the chewing mechanism more than anything else. So basically the big findings that we're looking at are alertness and increased mood. So both of those things have been associated with this, and cortisol levels and heart rate actually increase when chewing gum. So that means that you're kind of tapping into that fight or flight response, where you're going to be having improved focus and attention. Okay, so this study looked at chewing gum during the workday, and it did show that there was higher productivity and lesser errors that people made while they were working, as well as like mood and alertness and all of these things. I think a lot of these studies show similar findings in that regard. This one was a big study that looked on sustained attention, or 64% of the people showed positive attributes on their attentional processes. 5% showed negative attributes. So it's kind of a little bit all over the place, but definitely the majority had positive. So there may have been some other confounding factors that they didn't account for there. So I'm not entirely sure how the study was performed in that regard.
Yeah, I think the main discussion that they were saying is that, you know, there's that optimal level of arousal, right? And they're saying the main mechanism that they're identifying here is that it helps increase our autonomic arousal, right? When we're really keyed up, we focus, and, you know, we might have what many of you guys probably recognize as tunnel vision. We're not able to pick up a lot of cues because we're just tunneled in on this really small thing, and that's over here. And when we're too relaxed, we might be seeing too much. We might be seeing, oh, we see this on the mini map. We see one guy here in front of me. We see one guy here in front of me. I have this cooldown coming up. My teammate made a call out, so I need to pay attention to all this. I don't know what team to decide. That's over here, right? An optimal level of performance is right in the middle, where you're picking up and being able to filter the right cues that you're finding in front of you. And so what they're saying is that chewing gum allows us to increase our autonomic arousal. So if you're in this relaxed state, chewing gum can often do this. But if you are the type that naturally is a little more keyed up, chewing gum can cause you to move out of this level. And that's why there are decreases in attention and decreases in performance in some of these studies. So I think that's at least some of what I saw, in that it's this mastication induced arousal.
So this study was cool because it actually had something to do with reaction time and correct target detections, which is very relevant to you guys. So I just wanted to make sure that that was included in there, so you guys can see that it does actually have an effect on aim and target selection. And all of these studies seem to show that it has increases in heart rate as well, which is kind of a marker of that like arousal theory. So there's three major theories on kind of how this works. That optimal arousal theory, which Matt just described, enhanced cognitive performance from the gum, which actually comes from increasing the amount of sugar in the brain. So like I was saying with the carbohydrate rinsing, if you're tricking your brain into thinking that you're having something sweet, that actually has like a response with insulin as well. It's kind of the reason that people can still gain weight while drinking diet soda. So insulin is actually your body's like key to unlock your cells and let sugar in. So without insulin, the reason that diabetics have problems is that they don't produce enough insulin. So all the sugar in their blood never actually gets into the cells to give them energy and nutrients. So they just have really sweet blood, and all of their cells are starving because they don't have enough of this key to actually unlock the cell. So that insulin response increases the amount of sugar that can go into the cells of the brain, which actually helps it function better. Whether the gum is sweet or it's not, your brain still has that insulin response. And then the effects of chewing gum are caused by increased feelings of relaxation and reduced levels of stress. And that can also just kind of be more of a psychological thing. Like chewing gum, things are like you're kind of in a rhythm of doing it. It just decreases kind of the stress feelings that you're having. So all of these theories could be true simultaneously. They could be playing off of each other in different amounts, but we really don't know which one is the predominant one, and we don't know which one is really the reigning champ as far as explanations for this phenomenon go. But we do know that it works. So chew gum, switch Gatorade, get headshots.
And you want to definitely keep in mind that, guys, there is that 70-20-10 rule when it comes to performance, right? 70% of our performance does come from our basics, our foundation, our sleep, our exercise, our nutrition, all of the basics of physical health. And 20% might come from our cognitive skills, our mental skills, how we approach certain strategies for inside the game. And then 10% comes from those bonus, which are things like chewing gum, which are things like carbohydrate rinsing, which are things like game fuel, right? So focus on the majority, which is those underlying things.
All the gum you want in the world is not going to make a difference, like if you're not getting sleep.
Exactly. So now what we're going to do, and you guys can see my beautiful face here, we are going to I just used cocaine, as one person says. Okay. We are going to talk and answer all the questions, and then we're going to get into the AMA on Reddit. I will be hopping off to have some meetings with stuff, but the 1HP staff will ideally be answering your guys' questions. So going from top to bottom, we say, would chewing gum be more practical than carb rinsing in a tournament setting? Absolutely, unless you want to bring a bucket with you and just re-rinse. Chewing gum is definitely way more practical. and easy.
The carb rinsing lasts like 30 to 70 minutes though, so you could do that right before you play and then chew gum.
True. Wow.
Why not both?
Maybe there's some stacking. Maybe there's some stacking of
effects.
behaviors.
Maybe we should do these research studies that like we keep coming up with.
I know, right? Okay, so then we have SJ. What should my chair height be in relation to my desk? And is it bad to have friction with my arm? When I put my chair higher, it seems range of motion is limited and also gives shoulder pain. So what should my chair height be in relation to my desk? I think there's a lot of factors that might influence why you might be developing pain. So maybe I can demonstrate what should the appropriate height. Maybe you can describe for me while I demonstrate, because it's kind of hard for me to do both. Elliot.
Yeah, I'll let you know what he's.
Okay. So.
Oh, what you want me to describe what you're doing?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, so you want the chair height to be high enough. Well, so you want your shoulders, that's the first thing you want to look at, is are your shoulders able to sit relaxed comfortably at your side without being pressed too high? Are your feet flat on the floor? So once you've got both of those things figured out, that's how you know your chair is high enough when your feet are flat on the floor and your shoulders can rest comfortably at your side. And then your armrests need to come up to accommodate them. If your feet are not touching the floor in order for all of those other things to happen, then it's time to get a box to put underneath your feet. The shoulders being in a relaxed position and the armrests sitting underneath your elbows are the most important parts there. Ideally, you want your feet on the floor too, but as Matt just showed you, there's a rest that he's using as well. So that is your other solution to kind of play with the height of the whole setup.
And that's right. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, hey, we are also, if you don't have armrests, or if you like sitting closer and you have enough desk space, as you can see here, it's okay to have your forearm rest, right? But the chair height should influence whether your shoulder is active. Is it too far up or is it too low like this? Then it can create asymmetries and muscular imbalances. And the ultimate goal is neutral. We always want the neutral. Okay, so that's hopefully answer your question. Maybe SJ, that's causing the potential development of that shoulder pain. We also have a shoulder pain video. If you look in our YouTube, I'll do my best. While Elliot's answering the next question, I will put that link in the chat. It's called Gaming Shoulder, and maybe it'll help you initiate some exercises and changes in your posture that will be helpful for you and helpful for your shoulder pain.
Feet are flat on the floor for me. Do I want the desk to be where my elbow rests at my side at 90 degrees, or put the desk higher than? You want the desk to be where your elbows rest at your side at 90 degrees. If you put your legs on the sides of your chair, I think that's a great idea, actually.
What? Oh, what if legs on the sides of the chair?
The sides of the chair? Yeah, just like stand on your chair.
Yeah, perfect. Didn't Ron Rambo Kim? Yes, it was both of us. We combined and collaborated on this piece together. Yeah, we got Alex. We're combining carbohydrate rinsing and chewing gum. If you're feeling tired, you're under aroused, if you're fatigued, you're not as alert, right? So I think Phil says, so chewing gum gives you more energy. Not necessarily more energy. It just gives you, you're just in a more state of alertness. You're increasing your autonomic level of arousal. It's not giving you more energy. You're just becoming more
depending on the theory, you might be getting more sugar to your brain. So maybe.
True. I guess in the neuroscience or the autonomic arousal approach, it's not. But if in the other approach, it might be a combination of both. Best gum brand is where it shocks you when you try to grab it. That's definitely happened to us before. Does consuming food affect exercise performance? Absolutely. It all comes down to restoration of muscle glycogen, because that is sort of one of the main resources of energy that we require for muscle performance. And then there's our three energy systems, our phosphocreatine system, aerobic and anaerobic energy systems. And my lower back hurts after long gaming sessions. I'm going to link what I call the lower back med kit into the chat, and so that you guys can learn a little more about low back pain in gaming and why it hurts, and then do some exercises that might be beneficial for you. So I'm going to be posting that in the chat right now. Thoughts on using a compression sleeve? I started using one to limit the dead skin that gets on my mouse pad. Oh, that's good. That's a good. And I use a basic Nike sports sleeve. I mean, in the context of what, right? Like, will it help you with potential recovery? There is some evidence to support that. It depends on how tight the compression sleeve is, because it's providing this external pressure that will help facilitate return of flow through your venous system back to your heart. And maybe if there's inflammation, or maybe if there's overuse or irritation, it can flush out some of the buildup of these inflammatory molecules locally. That would be the underlying mechanism for that. And there is also the idea that if you have pain, when you get this mechanical pressure on your forearm, it can reduce pain through this mechanism as called the gate pain mechanism. But it depends on what context you're looking for. It can help with changing the input of pain, which is what we just talked about, or it can also help with maybe a little bit of recovery, but it's not the end all be all. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you guys so much for being so engaged in this discussion. If you guys can just do us a one favor, which is tweet out the 1 or 2 things that you guys learned from this. Tag us, tag any of us, share this so you guys can really help the rest of the community learn a little more about what you learned. Because ultimately our goal is to help gamers be better, whether it just be on the posture ergonomics front, nutrition front, sleep front, on all potential fronts. Leave also in the chat what you guys want to learn about next. We are open to discussing many things. We are interested ourselves in sort of the discussion of game fuel and some of the ingredients within those that we're gonna look to break down. That's kind of it for us. Thank you guys again. Please
try the gum thing.
What's up? Oh yeah,
try the gum thing. Try the carbohydrate rinsing, and then tweet at us when you do, and let us know how it went, because we want more, at least just like stories from gamers about how it goes. Exactly. So whether it's scientific or not, just let us know like what you did and how it worked, if you notice any difference. And
we love you guys.
Matt does. Bye. I think you guys are
okay. Bye guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you need individualized coaching for your injuries, sleep, exercise, or nutrition, you can check out our Patreon. And of course, you can catch us live on YouTube or Twitch. Play more, hurt less.